Hello and welcome to another edition of one of my videos about Kerbal space program. And as you can see, I'm going to launch something big here. Since I played Kerbal space program, which is a few months now, I've been trying to make a ring space station, to be more exact, a refueling station that is shaped like a ring, or due to lack of curved parts like a hexagon or octagon. Problem is, getting that kind of hardware into space is quite tricky, to be honest. And so far I haven't made it. I could show you some old footage of space stations that just exploded, but for now we will stick to this. This was made in Kerbal Space Program 0.25, where the launch pad would not collapse under the weight of this launcher. As you can see, I've emptied most of the fuel tanks because I was not able to get a payload of over 1,000 tons into space. Reducing the fuel on the elements of the fuel station reduced the entire mass of the payload to about 300 or 350 tons, which is easily manageable with my weird little launcher vehicle that you can see here. It's, how do you put it, a cross between a regular staging vehicle and an asparagus staging. There you go, first stage. And we're still climbing. This will take a few minutes. But we're just going to jump straight ahead to the more relevant parts of this launch. And there is the next stage. Jebediah Kerbin looking excited. There you go, this is one of the critical parts. Here I have to shut off the entire engines, engage the staging, and then start the rocket motors again. Why? Because for some reason I haven't yet figured out, as soon as I separate the stages and fire this stage, as I separate the previous stage and fire this stage, the rocket sometimes explodes, but that can be avoided by doing as I said, which is shutting the rocket down, letting it glide for 1 second or so, and then starting up the rockets again. And here we go. We've reached an orbit of around 500 kilometers, and the keen-eyed viewer will recognize immediately that Jebediah Kerbin is no longer in the cockpit. That is because I recorded the launch later and put that before it in the edit. Sorry about that. And here we go. The purpose of that launch is to put the entire space station into orbit and then assemble it into a hexagon. To do that, I put two space togs onto the launch, which are basically just some RCS fuel tanks with a drone core and 2 docking ports, and of course enough power. To survive this, I'm using the docking line mod to line up my craft, which is very helpful. Believe me, I would not have made this, it wouldn't have been possible to put this entire station together without that mod, at least not in a way that would have made it look good. The station consists of 6 main nodes and some connectors in between, which you can see moving around right here. You see my target where I'm going to dock this, and this is already sped up. I've increased the speed to about 4 times or even 8 times in the edit, because the entire operation took me well, the better half of a day, to be honest. I think the raw footage was about 3 or 4 hours, not counting the quick reloads, the quick save reloads. And here we go, lining up with the docking port, coming right in. Problem is, I did not put any reaction wheels on that connectors or any RCS ports, so it's a little bit front heavy. And there we go, and the first part is docked. You'll see a lot of this in this video, but I'd like to talk about some parts of the Kerbal space program in general, and also about some space station stuff that might interest you. If you've noticed, I've, with some exceptions, I've mainly utilized the senior docking ports. The reason being that those offer far greater stability when connecting large parts as such as I'm using here. And also I found, at least, that when you want to connect a spacecraft or any vehicle that has more than one docking port, for instance, if you want to connect a spacecraft with 2 docking ports each, then for some reason the senior docking ports work better than the regular docking port, the 1.25 meter docking ports. Don't know if that is a bug or some weird physics stuff, but it's just the way that I experienced it while playing. Since some part of the station is in the shadow, I decided to switch on the lights. I got about, well, tens of thousands units of electricity on there, so that should be way enough to make it until the station is finished. And of course, if you don't set the right target docking port, you end up somewhere entirely else where you should be. Here's my navigational skills, letting us down completely, trying to line up the vehicle with the docking port and move it into position. And we have a beautiful view of Kerbin in the back. Oh, you see, that's one of the main reasons I love to play KSP, because the view from space is something that I really like. I really find amazing, and to be honest, I think I would give 1 or 2 of my limbs to be able to go up there in real space sometime. But unfortunately, probably if I would give up 1 or 2 of my limbs, then they would not let me on board, because I would be of rather little use to them, since nowadays, at least at the time being, everybody who goes to space has to perform at least some duty on a mission. Except maybe when there's some stinking rich billionaire or so. So, space tourism is not yet there where I would like it to be, but maybe I live long enough to see that happen. And where should I put my space tug next? Yeah, that looks like a promising docking port. It's been, it's been tricky to kind of guess which part I should take next, because I did not really have a plan how I would do that. I just tried to pack everything tightly together and did not think so much of specific order I would put that station back together in orbit. Regardless, here we go. I'm lifting up one of the main modules and try to put it on one of the connectors, which, as we will see quite soon, will result in very uncomfortable wobbling. There we go, moving the heavy part, which consists, well, basically, it's just 7, is it 7? Yeah, it's 7 Kerbin tanks stacked together, with docking ports on them everywhere I could put them, and some lights and RCS thrusters, as you can see, and I think there's also some RCS included. Or is it? No, RCS is only included in the connectors and in the spacecraft in the spacecraft tug. There we go, closing in, there we go. And I think this was the moment where I realized I put that module upside down. Yes. Turning off the... There we go. Realizing my mistake and switching it around to put it in the correct order. New space stations are a fascinating thing. Ever since they tried to put people into space, it's been quite the journeys until the International Space Station that's floating in low Earth orbit at the moment. If you think about the first space station, which was, of course, the Salyut 1, one of the Russian models, it was a tiny thing. It was even tinier than the I think it could even fit into the cargo bay of a space shuttle, and it only had room for 3 people on it. Nowadays, the International Space Station, it has a crew of 6 at the moment, but it's huge. It's over 70 meters in length and could fill the area of a big football stadium. So there's been remarkable progress in that field compared to the 60s when all of that began. And as we all know, the Soviets were quite the pioneers in regard to space travel. And not only did they put the first human into space and the first dog and the first space station, they also put the first armed space station into orbit. Yes! Years, even decades before Ronald Reagan decided that lasers would save the USA from Soviet missiles, the Soviets put a space station into orbit with a gun on it. Well, fortunately it was just comparatively small, and it was really a hassle to fire it because it wasn't put on a turret or anything. You had to move the entire space station. It was the Almaz space station, which were kind of a derivative of the Salyut stations, and you had to move the entire space station towards the threat and then fire the gun, which was not really some space-age laser or photon torpedo or anything like that. No, it was a regular old gun which they took from a Tupolev bomber and just put on there. As far as we know, there has not been any firefight in orbit between Russian and American astronauts, but who knows, maybe James Bond got it right. Maybe there has been something like the Moonraker program. Maybe they had some exciting laser battles in orbit. Maybe hundreds of brave soldiers on both sides died defending the secrets of their nations. But honestly, I don't think so. Moving on. We have different... Maybe you have noticed we have different kind of spokes on the space station. we have the outer connectors and we have two inner connectors. The latter ones have already been connected, and now I'm moving on to complete the outer ring. And as I've mentioned before, the typical Kerbal wobble has begun. The space station dancing to its own physics motion for reasons I cannot understand. Maybe because I have not looked into it deep enough, or maybe because I'm just too stupid. I don't know, and I don't care, because I managed to do it anyway with using the magic of time acceleration. Yes, time acceleration helps a lot when you encounter spacecraft that starts to wobble uncontrollably, because as soon as you hit that button, it stops, and when you get back to normal time, the wobble does not pick up where it has left, but starts again. So you have kind of a slight, tiny window where you can operate, hit time acceleration, continue to the point where you have to maneuver again, hit time acceleration again, and so on, till you manage to finish the maneuver you're trying to do. As you can see, this was quite tricky to line that up without the station falling apart, which was something I experienced with one of my bigger spacecrafts in one of the earlier versions of the game. It was quite an interesting bug, because I tried to dock with it and the spacecraft was just hanging there in orbit, minding its own business, and every time I moved the other craft, the target craft moved as well. I rolled left, the target craft rolled left. I rolled right, the target craft rolled right. I pitched up, the target craft pitched up. It was really annoying, and I have no idea why that happened. They've possibly fixed that bug, because I have not encountered it again since that time. And there we go, jettisoning one of the attachment points I've used to put this to put the connectors in a straight line. If you haven't noticed already, I'm using two space tugs here, mainly for symmetry reasons, because I put the control module in the middle, and I had two docking ports left, one on the left, one on the right. And instead of just adding one space tug, I thought, oh, to the hell with it, let's use two. And here we have another interesting bug. As you can see, for some reason, this part has decoupled itself without me doing anything. This is me just staring at it and wondering what to do with it. Because every time I move the main node, that connector moves as well, which is kind of, I think, the same bug that I've told you earlier with the two spacecraft moving in unison. I'm just experimenting like a stupid madman what to do with it, and my gears really rotating in my head and trying to figure out what to do without having to using a quick save, because the last quick save has been quite in the past, to be honest. As you can see, no, it's not attached, it's not anywhere. Move left, yeah, the connector moves left. Move right, the connector moves right. And then I tried, oh well, then I said to myself, oh well, fuck it. I just leave this here and pick it up later, and let's just hope that it is not subject to the same bug as the decoupler. So where is my vessel? Where is my craft I want to control? There I am, and I'm using the decoupler now to separate it from my fuel hub, so I can put it into its place. there I am back with my space tug, which is of course controlling the fuel hub. As you can see, I can move around with the connector moving. There we go, testing out if it works. Yes, the connector just hangs there in space, minding its own business, not moving as I am moving. So I was happy to continue. You know, the more I think of it, I think that bug where parts of spacecraft or spacecraft move in synchronicity, maybe it's due to the fact that, and you may or may not know this, that spacecraft or anything you build in Kerbal Space Program, it's not really a unit. Every part you connect kind of floats. It's just, let's say, if you start a rocket, it's like 200 parts launching in tight formation. Every part is just sitting there. That's how the technology behind the game works. And maybe that's one of the reasons for this kind of very uncomfortable bug. But there we go, and we have enough time to catch up with our rogue connector and put it back to where it belongs, which is on the spacecraft, or rather the space station. These outer elements, these outer connectors, are also the source for RCS fuel for spacecraft who will in future visit my space station to replenish their resources and continue on missions into interplanetary space, to new planets, to new moons, and maybe new discoveries. But until then, we have to continue our work and connect the next element to this hub. And here we go. As you can see, it starts to take shape. It already looks like, well, something. Not a hexagon yet, but you can maybe imagine how it will look when it is finished. But you don't. If you want to see the finished product, of course, you can skip right ahead to the end of this video, but then you would miss me blabbering about Kerbal Space Program space stations and my own shortcomings playing this game. Lining up the next connector. And here we go. Enough electricity left, enough time left. No chance this thing is falling back to the surface because we're in a stable orbit of 500 kilometers, which is a lot higher than a low Kerbin orbit, but not that high as, for instance, the Moon. And here we go and move the next piece around. You know, after all this Cold War stuff died down, as we all know, Soviets and Americans, or rather then Russians and Americans, started to explore space together. And one of the first results of that cooperation, or maybe not one of the first, but one of the most famous, to be honest, was the Mir space station, which actually means peace. Or if you prefer the second meaning of the word, it means world. If you know the movie, well, the terrible movie Armageddon, the Mir space station played a vital part in that movie by being a fuel station for the two monstrous, hideous, and scientifically completely bogus space shuttles that Bruce Willis and his crew of oil drillers flew onto an asteroid. What I wondered all the time was, how the hell did they get the fuel up on the Mir in the first place, and how much fuel must the Russians have bunkered up there, and why? And why do they have to start rotating the entire space station, which was not built to be rotated at all? Well, let's say it like it is. It was the power of plot device, because to make a movie entirely with in zero gravity, they would have had to use either a lot of CGI, a lot of parabol flights, and or a lot of rigging. And I don't really think that it would have been very graceful to see who's the guy who played the Russian? Peter Stormare? How's he called? I think it's Peter Stormare. Let's just look it up. Thank God for IMDb. Yes, it's Peter Stormare, that wonderful actor who plays bad guys every time. Except for this, to be honest, the crazy Russian astronaut was not a bad guy. In fact, he was a good guy. American technology, Russian technology, all made in Taiwan. One of the more memorable quotes of that dreadful movie Armageddon. And yeah, as I was saying, to be honest, I think they just had to make the Mir rotate and provide gravity by rotating, so they could let the actors run through a set and jump through a set and fall downstairs through a set, instead of just letting them float around. And also, of course, one of the most stupid points of that scene was, if there really had been rotational gravity on the Mir space station, then the center would have been weightless still. So they was, well, let's just not think about that movie any longer and concentrate on a real space station like this one. Well, real to the Kerbals, of course. And our good little friend Oblong Kerbin just sits and waits there until the space tugs have finished their work. But maybe they're not doing it on itself. Maybe he is doing it by remote control. Maybe the Kerbals don't yet have the technology for sufficient artificial intelligence to make a space probe exercise delicate maneuvers like this. Maneuvers where they almost shear off their solar panels because they're too stupid to steer them correctly. But let's not mind my bad flying and just watch the majesty of this station being put together. And here we go. We're really nearing completion now with the next element of the outer ring. Well, the ring actually, because there is no inner ring. On the other hand, the station is so modular that I could actually build another ring around it, but then it would increase to a bazillion parts and the game would slow down to about 0.5 FPS or something. It already is going very slow. The footage is kind of misleading, to be honest, because I have been using, as I said before, I've accelerated the footage in the edit to about 4 times and 8 times regular speed to, well, for you, my dear viewers, for you, so you don't have to sit through the entire 3-hour ordeal. And to be honest, I don't think you want to listen to me talking for 3 hours straight. There we go. Almost. You see? Can you imagine it in your head? Can you see how that will look when it's finished? I sure hope so. I know how it looks finished because I have finished it, and also before I launched it, I put it together in the VAB in the correct order. there we go. Before we can move on with the next part, we have to move the control module, which has, of course, its own power, its own RCS fuel, and a capable pilot on board. I'm really just using tiny bursts of RCS, so I don't spend my resources, because then I would have to come in with the tug, refuel that command pod, and then put it back on track. But as you can see, no worries, we're moving where we should go. And since Oblong Kerbin is where he belongs, we can continue with the next module. But which should we take? This is the part where I put one of the connectors onto another hub so it does not float away, so I can pick up the hub where it is connected currently, put it in its correct position, and then continue with the assembly. Wonderful Kerbin in the background. I really love the scenery of KSP, and as you may have noticed, if you're an experienced Kerbal space program player, I'm using a mod called Environment Visual Enhancements, which adds clouds to the surface of the planet. Well, not to the surface, but to the atmosphere, of course. But since the atmosphere of any planet is comparably thin to its entirety, you could very well say just surface. Unfortunately, I've encountered some problems with that in the current version of Kerbal Space Program 0.90, the beta than ever version, which results in the game slowing down very much and taking up a lot of RAM. Well, so I have to do with a Kerbin without any clouds at the moment, but due to the benefit of 0.25, you can see it in its entire beauty with the mod. Speaking of mods, as you may have noticed already, I'm using the docking port alignment indicator mod, which actually is working in 0.90, and I'm using MacJab, which I use for a variety of things, including getting my orbital information when trying to land a craft, getting the correct surface altitude, which Kerbal Space Program does not provide in that meter up above, but instead it just shows me the altitude at sea level, which does not help in all cases. And yes, I use from time to time the autopilot function, because let's be honest, if you have to launch 5 or 6 rockets in quick succession, it gets a little bit tedious and, dare I say it, boring. As you may have noticed, I'm retracting some of the solar panels so that my tugs don't get damaged when I get too close to the space station. And here we go with that module that had the connectors on it. I'm lining it up so I can fire the decouplers without damaging the rest of the station. And success, they're drifting off safely into deep space, drifting off as space debris, so that in the future some unlucky craft can crash into them for some of the next Kerbal catastrophes, which is actually a video I should put together, Kerbal catastrophes. There have been some, and a lot of them are on video. But this one did not end in catastrophe, at least not on the final save, because I had, to be honest, I had to reload quite a lot of times. Sometime the thing just exploded out of nowhere, sometime it just started to wobble uncontrollably, and sometimes it just would not connect at all. But in the end, I managed to finish this space station as it was intended. There we go, removing ourselves from the hub and moving the next connector into place. You know, one of my first space stations I built in the Kerbal space program was almost, well, not really a copy of the ISS, but it looked a little bit like it, you know, like it had that science module and the habitation modules, and it was connected with the regular docking ports. There were some solar panels, huge solar panels on them, and it was put together in space with multiple launches. And after I put that together, it was in sandbox mode, and I think it was one of the first things I did in Kerbal Space Program. After I put that together in sandbox mode, I realized I had no use for the lab or any of the science experiments because I was playing in sandbox mode and there was not any science I could gather. Of course, if you want to use a space station to gather science, you're a little bit, to be honest, you're lost with the regular stock parts, but there is that mod called Station Science, which you may or may not have heard of, which provides you with station parts that can generate science. So you can put a huge space station into orbit and gather lots of science with by performing experiments on that station. And speaking of station, we're adding the next part to it. At least we're trying, but we're too quick and we're bouncing off. And here we are. And once again using the magic of time acceleration to prevent the entire thing from wobbling away. So only 2 more parts are left, but those are the tricky ones, because here we have to align 2 docking ports with on our target. So how to do that ideally? Well, first of all, we have to get the part we desire by moving our tug into position without actually ruining the solar panels. Well, it has a lot of batteries on it, so it should be fine for the most part, but let's just be on the safe side, shall we? And there we go, moving in. Moving into the penultimate part. Yes, I said penultimate. And docking. And here we go. Only 2 parts left until this beauty is finished. And now the big decision, where should I put my target? You know, because if I used one of the left or right docking part, it would just align that one. So in the end, what I did, and you can see that in a few seconds, what I did was I just used the docking port opposite of the space tug and the docking port in the center of the space station. So I could really line up that hub directly into the center of my station and put it there correctly. Because as you see, as soon as I stop the time acceleration, the station begins to wobble and wobble and wobble. So if I line up with one part, with the left part or the right part, they wobble rather more. They wobble a lot more than just the center part. where of course the center of gravity is located. As you can see here, I tried the original approach by just moving onto one of the docking ports on the right side in this time. But as you can see, it's a bit trickier than I imagined, and it starts to move and wobble. And then I finally made the decision to target the center, turn it around, and get in there. Just slide it in between those wobbly bits, and hopefully stabilize the entire station by stabilizing the wobbly bits. There we go, moving in, moving in. Actually like how that looks, you know, that the look of that fuel hubs with those tanks smashed together. I know there's some people who don't like part clipping, where the parts like move into each other like here. But since the developers themselves now in the beta version offer to offset parts and rotate them inside and outside of other parts, I think it's kind of part of the game now. And here we go, and we have a dock on both connectors, and we're almost finished. The final piece is missing, but we know where it is and we know where it has to go. So we send our other tug to get it and to add it to the space station. This was another example of where the space station then suddenly spontaneously combusted. As you can see, look at it wobble, look at it wobble around. Really some heavy wobble going on here. And also I think that here the I move and you move bug that I mentioned earlier struck again. Trying to line it, this was really hard because it moved out of the way every time. Every time I got closer, it moved further away, and it was really annoying. But somehow I managed to get a dock, to get a clean dock on that port, and of course, as I mentioned before, it helped that it was a senior docking port and not one of the regular ones. So off I went and tried to put it back together. There was one reload of a quick save in there somewhere. I'm not really sure where it was. I cut it out in the edit. But in the end I managed to load part of the game where to reload in such a way that the wobble suddenly stopped and I could dock without any problems. Well, I think that was after the entire game crashed or something. And there we go, the final piece lining up nicely. And here we go, the fuel station Hex, as I like to call it, coming together with its final piece, moving in. The brave engineers of the Kerbal space program have produced a marvel of technology, a haven for empty spacecraft in dire need of extra fuel, who need their juice to continue their missions. But we're not done yet. A few millimeters are left. Just a little lining up to do to get a dock on both connectors. And here we go. Magnetic seals trying to engage, and we are docked. At least on one side. Let's hope this wobbles into place, and yes, it has, and we are docked, we are docked. we are docked here and on this side and here, and yes, I am checking every dock to make sure that this space station is stable. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the fuel station Hex is open for business. Look at it! I think it's beautiful. What do you think? What are your space stations? What kind of behemoths have you managed to launch into orbit? Comment below, let me know. And yes, I quoted Jeremy Jahns here. Sorry about that. And as you can see, the frame rate sucks really bad right now because of all those parts included in that space station. As I mentioned before, I think it's over more than 1,000 parts or something like that. And well, it still has a lot of fuel, but not that much, to be honest. I could put a lot more there, but that would be it's time for later missions where I refuel my refuel station. And yes, I realize the irony of it. Now, hanging there into space, let's open the docking ports by pressing one of the action group keys. And also, of course, since the space station has a lot of batteries and uses a lot of energy, it needs solar panels. And there they go, opening majestically, opening the Gigantor XL solar panels to release the entire beauty of this space station. Look at Oblong Kerbin smiling away and admiring his own work, or at least his new workplace, where he will spend the remainder of his Kerbal life until I decide to retrieve him or dump that space station into the ocean. But I don't think I will do that anytime soon, because actually I'm quite proud of this achievement. Maybe you've done better, I don't care. I like this. I like this a lot. So, the last thing for me is to say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to all I had to say. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, well, just don't. Thanks very much. Enjoy Kerbal Space Program. Enjoy YouTube. Have a good time. Good night. And if you're a fellow Kerbinaut, I wish you good luck with your own creations. I know how hard it is to put together a great spacecraft, but it is a very big reward in itself to see it work. Goodbye.